Okay, we're rolling.
Okay. This is an interview at Avila Senior Residence, Albany, New York. It is the 12th of May 2006, approximately 11:15 a.m. Interviewers are Wayne Clark and Mike Russert. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and your date of birth, please?
February 1, 1925. My name is Theodore Joseph Beebe,
Where were you born?
Albany, New York.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
I graduated from high school about a month before I went into the service.
Okay. Do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
At home in Albany, on Jefferson Street.
How did you hear about it?
A news report on the radio.
What were your feelings when you heard about this?
I don't recall that I had any particular feelings other than I thought we were going to go to war.
Okay. Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I was drafted
Okay.
from Schenectady.
Okay. Where did you go for your basic training?
Miami Beach.
So were you assigned to the Army Air Force right away when you were drafted?
At the station I reported to, which was on Long Island, Patchogue.
Okay. How long was your basic training in Miami? Approximately.
2 months, 60 days.
Whereabouts did you go from there?
I went to Sioux Falls, South Dakota for radio school as a radio operator.
How long was that school?
6 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We went from there to Yuma, Arizona for gunnery training. That lasted about 2 months.
So your position was you're a radio operator / gunner also?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have to learn Morse code?
I had to do 20 words a minute. It was of encrypted messages, so these were five-letter group, and so you had a whole sheet that was nothing but 5 letters, a couple of hundred of them on a standard-sized page.
Okay.
When were you finally assigned to an aircraft?
We were allowed to go on leave from Yuma, and was gone for 30 days, reported to Lincoln, Nebraska, and were assigned to a crew. I was sent to Rapid City, South Dakota. I was there for a few months.
What kind of aircraft were you assigned to?
It was a B-17.
Okay.
I had difficulty flying. I was not functional. And we had a very severe thunderstorm. The pilot managed to fly through it, came back through it, and I went to the medical dispensary, and I told them I would not go up again. I didn't care what they did with me, but I wasn't going to go up again. The crew I was flying with on our next flight had a crash landing. Everybody walked away from it, probably because I wasn't there. The gentleman who filled in for me on that flight had finished 25 missions in Europe. He told everybody where to sit, how to brace themselves. But that's all I know about the accident.
What did they do with you?
KP for a while, and they sent me to Dalhart, Texas. They were assembling a B-29 group to go to the Pacific, Japan. We were actually sent to Okinawa. later, but from Dalhart, we went to Pratt, Kansas, where the squadron that I was assigned to was in training.
Now, what was your job to be at that point? If you weren't flying anymore?
Radio operator in a ground station.
Okay.
But they'd spent a lot of time training me. They weren't going to lose it. I was associated with armament people, radio operators, all kinds of specialties. Most of us were dropouts from flying.
So what were your duties as a ground station operator? What did you do? Just
Radio. That pretty much was it. We eventually wound up over in Okinawa, and so anytime the planes in my squadron were up, the station, we would have somebody on the ground communicating with them.
Did your duties include air traffic control at all?
No. The squadron had to send back reports where they were. If they were on a bombing mission, they had to send back reports if they had dropped them.
And everything was encoded, pretty much?
Pretty much encoded, yes.
Okay. What was life like in that unit? Was it a good size squadron?
Oh. Yeah, it was, it consisted of, there were about 8 of us who were radio operators, and enough ground support people to maintain a dozen or 2 dozen aircraft.
Were you in tents or Quonset huts?
On Okinawa, we started off in 8-man squad tents. They were on a wooden platform. We were there for a short time. We had a typhoon. It wiped out the whole area. There were 3 squadrons in the wing. The headquarters squadron told the men that any materials that we were all told to go out and scrounge to get ourselves back under cover. And so the headquarters squadron was told all the material they brought in, they were to return into headquarters. The other squadron was told to turn in half of the material they brought in. The squadron I was in told us to go and get whatever we could and build our house. It was ours. And we did. We went out and scrounged material. We were the first ones under cover. We even had one group of 8 men built a house that would have been very nice on any camp in the United States. They had double hung sliding windows and doors and partitions, and the group I was with, we settled for something a little less.
Did you have any problems with tropical diseases like malaria or dengue fever or anything like that?
Oh dear, what they call it? I picked up a skin rash of some kind.
Like jungle rot?
I can't recall what they called it anymore.
Dermatitis?
A little bit worse than that. They put me in a hospital so that I wouldn't contaminate anybody else, primarily. It was an infectious kind of a disease that I had, and probably got it helping some natives off the back of the truck. Yeah, but I was there for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then they sent me back to my unit. Shortly after I got back, they decided that they broke up the unit I was with, and I got reassigned to a Signal Corps company. They were maintaining the ground communications with planes in the air at that time. When we arrived on Okinawa, we were to be part of the 8th Air Force. They were moving the 8th Air Force from England to the Pacific Theater of Operation. General Doolittle was the commanding officer. It was his intention to get in a strike on Tokyo before the war ended, so that the Air Force would have in its record that it had operated in both theaters of operation. Or so it was said. I wasn't that far up the ladder to know for sure. That never happened because, for one thing, he did not have all his flight crews there. His intention was to use all of the ground service people that he had on site to make his first strike. And but because we were only within weeks of the armistice, it did not happen. And I and my associates were thankful for that.
Did you ever see him personally?
Never saw him. No.
Well, where were you when the atomic bombs were dropped?
On a ship at sea, I believe between Hawaii and Eniwetok.
What was the reaction? Do you remember at all?
I think we all felt that that probably would bring on the end of the war. But, however, we still continued. On that trip, we did stop in Hawaii for a short time. We did not get to see anything in Hawaii. We were put in trucks, driven to a beach, went in for a swim, got back in the truck, and they closed it all up. And took us back to the ship. So we didn't get to see the island at all. And we went to Eniwetok. We did not go ashore in Eniwetok. And we went from there to an island called Ulithi. It's just a few degrees north of the equator. There was nobody on the island when we went ashore. There was a structure, open post structure with a roof on it. It was full of beer when we arrived. It was full of empty bottles when we left. We went back on the ship. It was a training exercise. We had to go down cargo nets over the side of the ship to be loaded into small landing craft and went ashore from there. I can still remember going down that cargo net. I didn't dare look down. Among other things, I don't swim. And if you did look down, the depths of the water was endless. And I could see the hull of the ship kind of moving away from me. And almost, well, anyway, I did manage to get off. We went for a swim. The water was so warm, it was like going in bath water. And we went from there to Okinawa. The regulations at port, we arrived at dusk, was that no ship was allowed to anchor in the harbor overnight with troops on board. We were at that time subjected to kamikaze attacks, and they did have an air raid during the time we were there. I do not know whether it was real or not. The only reason they allowed the ship we were on to stay in port is that we had a smoke generator on that ship, so we were able to add to the defense system in terms of smoke, so that whoever was raiding couldn't pick out a target. Inasmuch as on the trip over they had stopped running the smoke system because the first time they had a drill on the ship, for abandoning ship in the event that we were torpedoed or something of that kind. They filled up the hold with smoke, and we almost choked to death. And they stopped running the smoke generator, and so when they got to Okinawa, they forgot, and they filled up the hold with smoke again.
Now, when you left Okinawa, where did you go from there?
Seattle, and got discharged out of Fort Dixon, New Jersey.
Now, you were then called up in 51?
I went into ROTC when I went to college.
Oh, okay. Did you go on the GA Bill?
Yes.
Okay.
I would not have, I went to RPI, I would not have gone there if that meant the GI Bill. Didn't quite cover my expenses. I got married in my freshman year, and they allowed us credit for the first 2 years, and the Air Force started a program just prior to my starting my junior year, and so I went into ROTC. In January, they told us of my senior year, they told us that we could expect to be activated when we graduated. 30% of the people dropped out of the program, and on graduation day, I went to the commissioning service in the morning, received my orders to report in a few weeks, and got my degree from college in the afternoon. And so I went to Wright Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio as a second lieutenant. 400 second lieutenants reported to Wright Patterson Air Force Base, so all engineering personnel. They were assigned to various laboratories in the at Wright Patterson. Wright Patterson at that time did all of the specifications for Air Force equipment except for electronics. And I wound up in an office that was the final review of all specifications being developed at Wright Patterson. And there were 7 of us in the office, and the Inspector General's office came through and interviewed all the people in the office, and they had 7 second lieutenants complained about the office and the way it operated. And they invited us to visit with the Inspector General's colonel who ran that office, and my other 6 guys elected me to be the one to do it. And they sent somebody along to keep an eye on me because they didn't trust me. And we spent 2.5 hours outlining the operation of that office for the gentleman who ran the Inspector General's office. I was reassigned. They stuck me in the mailroom. I wrote up a plan for how that office should operate. It was scheduled for a Friday. I couldn't go in on Friday. I was sick. They had to cancel the meeting, and they rescheduled it for the following Monday. And they found out who the guy was who was leading the program to change the office on Monday. I was reassigned to the Inspector General's office as an investigator from that point on. I only had a few more months in that tour of duty. We were expected to be released pretty soon. So that tour of duty lasted for 17 months. I worked an 8 to 5 shift, 5 days a week. I had 2 occasions in which I fulfilled a military function while I was there. There were 40 generals on that field. and only 200 privates. There were more second lieutenants than there were privates.
Now, what were your duties? Yes.
I was reviewing specifications for ground equipment to be sure that there was nothing in them that was detrimental. We second lieutenants thought they could do a better job of pre-screening the material. They didn't need our people with our competence, at our competence level, to review the specifications. There were some restrictions on what kind of comments we could make. We didn't think that made sense. But that pretty much was it.
You stayed in that position until you were discharged?
Yes. Well, I went into the Inspector General's office for about 3 months.
Mm-hmm. Now, you were discharged from active duty in 53, I think I saw, 52. You had to go into the reserves then?
I went into the reserves. At one point, a few years later, I decided if I'm going to stay in the reserves, I had to do something because they'd be putting me out.
Mm-hmm.
And about that time, I came down with a serious illness. And so I had to go for a physical. They sent me over to the induction center in Albany where they were taking in draftees at that time. And there was no active military war at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to the end of the line, and the officers just told me I was 1A, and I asked him if he read the last line on the medical report that I had to fill out. And he read it, and he said, well, I don't know if you're going to like this, you're 4F. And the sergeant from the Air Force who was there told me that the Air Force would review the circumstances, but I knew they were going to discharge me, mm-hmm. And they did.
And what year was that?
About 1956.
So you did make use of the GI Bill you mentioned?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Did you ever use the 5220 Club?
Don't recognize that.
They were, for 52 weeks, you got like an unemployment insurance of $20.
For a short time. But I went to work right as soon as I got out of service in 43. I was working right away. I went to work for Mike Insulated Company in Schenectady.
Okay. Did you ever join any veterans organizations?
No, I have not.
Okay. Did you ever stay in contact with anyone that you served with?
For a time. A gentleman by the name of Bernard Sloan, he lived in Brooklyn. But he's the only one, and after 8 or 9 years, I lost track of him. He moved once too often. I couldn't keep up with him.
How do you think your time in the service changed or had an effect on your life?
I probably was better disciplined when I came out. At least from my first tour of duty. I think the second tour of duty got me a job at General Electric Company. I interviewed with them before I went in the service, more just to give it a shot than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think at that time they would have picked me up. When my tour of duty was about over with, I set up an appointment with them, and they hired me on the basis that I had been a second lieutenant in the Air Force. But,
all right. Well, thank you very much for your interview.
Do you think if it hadn't been for the GI Bill, You would not have gone to RPI?
I would not have made RPI, I know it's too expensive, even then. I do think I would have gone to a college somewhere, but it would not have been RPI.
Mhm.
So the GI Bill afforded you the opportunity?
Afforded me that opportunity.
All right.